All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the LogiCast. My name is Blanka Kong. I'm joined by Mr. Esoteric, Hado Wolf. Gunnar Eos couldn't make it, unfortunately, so hopefully he'll make it for the next one. Today's topic is going to be: do quality of life changes in games improve or hinder our critical thinking skills as it relates to games? So, before I answer that question and before I give over uh, the floor to you guys, I had to look up the definition of all these terms to really have a good basis to argue my particular stance. So, according to Google, definition of quality of life as it pertains to games are elements cover a broad range of features that are designed to make games easier to play without changing the gameplay itself. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Critical thinking. Critical thinking is the intellectual discipline process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, communication as a guide to belief and action. In other words, you take what's given to you, you apply it, you learn it, and then you're able to accomplish whatever the game is asking you to do, right? My
Hmm.
answer, it depends on the game.
Yeah.
So I can't. It's hard to take a yes or no on this particular question. I think it depends on the quality of life change we're talking about, and it depends on the game that we're talking about. So there are shades of gray. Some examples, personal examples, would be Monster Hunter. We all play Monster Hunter in this chat. As you can tell from my background, I'm a big Monster Hunter fan. So not flexing after drinking a potion is a quality of life change that is very welcomed, because I don't think it definitely added a different, another layer of like awareness that you had to have. You couldn't just heal just to heal. You had to make sure it was safe to heal. And so one could argue that takes a certain amount of critical thinking and planning, which it does, but I could live without that change because I don't think it added to the core hunt or the core combat of the game personally, right? Leaps of faith in platformers. So when you're playing a platformer and you're getting to a section and you can't see what the hell is in front of you, so you don't know if you should jump forward, jump down, or what. There's just like no clues, right? That's a quality of life change that I would prefer not to have, right? Like, show me what the hell I'm supposed to do, right? Limited continues or lives. I'd rather not have limited continues, right? Let me play the fucking game. If I beat boss 1, 2, and 3, leave me off at level 4. Don't make me start all over again, right? Save states. That goes back to the point I just made, right? If I successfully beat levels 1 through 5, I beat it. Like, there's no reason I should have to beat it again in order to get back to level 6. One frame punishments. So that would be enemies that just pop up and hit you out of nowhere. It's like, and there was no clue or indication that that would happen. That's not, I can live without that. Difficulty options, I think, are a good thing, depending on the game. And then off screen attacks or projectiles. So if you play something like Contra and you're shooting and you're running through, and then a random little bullet just comes out of like nowhere at the bottom of the screen, and boom, you're dead. All that work for nothing, right? I hate that. So those changes in different games are welcomed for the most part. So those are the definitions I found. Those are my examples, and that's my stance. It depends on the game. What do you guys think?
I can start that. So I definitely agree where quality of life changes is very game, genre, and player dependent. It's um
Yeah.
it's it's definitely not something that is a hard yes or a hard no. There are quality of life changes in video games I've played that I accept, I love and welcome, and then there are some quality of changes that I feel makes the game too or simplifies the game too much, um, to where everything becomes overly accessible, and then your efforts as one player kind of becomes null and void to the efforts of another player, depending on the time and again, the time or the version of whatever game you're playing. So first example is back to your point with Monster Hunter, where I do appreciate the fact that we no longer can flex, that we no longer have to flex our muscles when we drink a potion. Um, like even now in Monster Hunter Rise, the way they changed how potions even worked, it's really simple. It's a huge quality of life changes going from Monster Hunter previous games to Monster Hunter Iceborne to Monster Hunter Rise. Now in Rise, you get an automatic chunk of health, and then it gives you gradual health to further increase your restore your HP bar. All that time you can pretty much walk while your HP is doing that, or you can negate the gradual increase and just take the automatic chunk and keep going. I appreciate that because it keeps the pace of the game going. Where I don't appreciate it is more so what I loved about Monster Hunter games in the past is its unforgiving build was, well, I need to be good at this game because taking a potion alone puts me in a situation where I can lose this fight against the monster.
Mhm.
So you always put yourself in a situation where it's like, okay, well, this is the monster's pattern. I gotta learn like what the monster does because I need to take as little potions as possible. I mean, in the early Monster Hunter games, you really could only carry what, 10 potions at a time. So you were very limited on even restoring your health. So it
I
was
think
more,
still 10 potions even now, but
mm,
I mean, it's always been 10 potions and it still is. But unlike past games and current games, current Rise, Monster Hunter Rise, you can go back to the camp and restock for free.
like, yeah,
Past Monster games, you couldn't do that. So
right.
yeah,
Um, so you can sort of kind of take it for granted at this point. But
true.
but what I'm saying is that because of that build, it allowed me as a early Monster Hunter player, it allowed me to want to get good at the game to save resources. So again, I accept the quality of life changes in the potions department, but I also feel like because of those changes, it allows gamers to take more risk, which means they don't really it kind of falls back on their critical thinking of what kind of position they're in, what kind of monster they're fighting, and how is this going to affect their decision of hitting the monster, running away, or, recklessly taking a potion to flex. So in that regard, I think it's just based on, again, it's a gray area thing. Whereas, like, say, there are quality of life changes I would like to see more in video games. Like, I read an article earlier today, and a guy pointed out a really good thing that I think all RPGs should do. Is in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, if you didn't, once you saved the game and you turned it off, and then you booted it up again, it would give you a little synopsis of what you did when you turned off the game.
I remember that.
Which, right, and it's that to me is it's amazing because it allows me to, like, RPGs are pretty complex games. You do a lot. um you read a lot of stuff, you talk to a lot of people, you grind a lot of monsters. Like, you can really get lost, and then if you turn off your game and don't go back to it for a couple weeks, ooh, when you load it back up, it's like, unless you really remembered where you left off, or unless it's a straightforward RPG like Final Fantasy 13, for example, you can really get lost in what, like, you can ask yourself, like, damn, Wolf, what the fuck did I just do? Like, where did I leave off on this? But a synopsis quality of life kind of mechanic will allow me and say, okay, well, this is what I did in, like, a 10-second video. This is what I did. Now continue to play. Which is, it's a great reminder for me to keep going, to pick up on it and so forth. I think that's a quality of life I think all RPGs or heavy story based games should implement. But unfortunately, I think only Pokemon Leaf Green and Fire Red has ever done it. Um, so I do feel like quality of life changes is definitely it's definitely a necessity moving forward in this generation. But at the same time, it definitely, me playing devil's advocate, it definitely, definitely does take away it allows the player to make more mistakes. And for that, people can tend to take things for granted. And when you start to take things for granted, your critical thinking does lower because now you can say, okay, well, I can take this hit because I know that I can take a potion because potion is pretty much limitless to me if I'm willing to take the time and go ahead and restock. So it's all based on the kind of person you are and the kind of genre you're playing, for example. Um, Again, I think I've said this game so many times on so many different streams or podcasts. Outriders. I used to complain to Blanka Kong. In a game like Outriders, reloading should not be a thing. If you do have to reload, it should not take you 3 seconds to reload. It shouldn't. Reload should be something that's almost super automatic to the point where you forget that you even have to reload. Like the character just does it and boom, that's it. Ammunition in gun, keep it going, keep it shooting because of how they throw the enemies at you. So it's a quality of life that I want in the game. So what it does, it will take away my critical thinking and saying, okay, well, I have 16 bullets in my shotgun. I know it can potentially take 8 enemies out, two bullets per enemy. So I have to calculate how am I going to go about this. But again, Outriders is a specific case. If you're going to throw 30 enemies at me at one time, which the game does do, the fuck does 16 bullets matter? Like, just allow me to reload so I can take out the 30 enemies without becoming overwhelmed. So it's all dependent. I definitely agree with Blanka Kong's point. That's my rant. Esoteric?
Oh wow, you guys definitely did say a lot there. Um First and foremost, I definitely do agree. It does depend on the game. Um I feel like there's always room for improvement when it comes to games. There's always some like nuances that are in prior games that we would want to be like removed in current games. But I feel like sometimes it goes past the threshold of removing nuances and just making games significantly easier. Um, for example, like I like the aspect of like you guys mentioned with Monster Hunter, the whole potions. Um, but that factor doesn't really make or break the game because you can still get your ass handed to you. It just makes it relatively easier for the player to think of different options to outmaneuver the monster and kind of protect themselves, so to speak. Um, I think the quality of life changes that I'm kind of annoyed with are ones that are constantly telling you every single minute what you need to do and where you need to go. I feel like it kind of diminishes your attentiveness to the game. It kind of breaks the lore of the game, like the whole um what's the word I'm looking for? The
Exploration?
immersiveness. Yeah, the immersiveness of the game. Um and I feel like if you actually are interested in playing the game, that you would remember certain components, certain button combinations of that game. Um, there's no reason why every time I come across a cliff that I'm being told to press X or A to jump. Like, but once you start playing the game continuously, that should be embedded in your brain, that this is jump and this is what you should do. So those are the kind of quality of life changes that I really dislike. One, hmm, what I would like to say, right, is I was thinking of Bloodborne as an example of a game that doesn't have much quality of life changes to it. And by that, it's pertaining to like it doesn't have a map. Um, there's no way to like navigate through a map or any type of system. You have to remember that on your own. And also, the sequential order of you like traversing through the game is by you remembering certain sequences that you have had. Um, and I think Dev did mention something pertaining to Pokemon about how they had like a little um, chart pertaining to like what you did and whatnot. I wouldn't have mind that for Bloodborne. Um, I mean, it's not even in the game to be honest. But I would like that implementation, but I wouldn't want something pertaining to, oh, here's where you go next. Here's what you're supposed to do. And a lot of games do that. If you guys are following, like even with
I follow you.
yeah, even with
Mm-hmm.
like Horizon Zero Dawn, it was an amazing game, but you were told almost all the time where to go, what to do, and so on. Here's the type of move that you should use on a particular monster, you know. And I feel like you're breaking the immersion, you're breaking the attentiveness, and like there's no cognitive thinking process with that. It's just the game is kind of like pushing you to do certain things, and it's like, is that really a game? That feels like a simulation to me, you know. Still a great game, but I would have been happy if they were to like remove those particular components of the game.
Mm.
So to add
Oh,
to the map thing, you
mm.
had something else?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So to add to the map thing, I agree with you. I think it works in certain games. So a personal example would be I have two. So the first is Stranded Deep. I played that game a few months ago. And it's like a survival game. I wouldn't say it's a great game. I wouldn't say it's something you have to play, but I enjoy those games because it provides a unique challenge. And basically, you're a guy who is on a plane. It crashes in like the Bermuda Triangle, and you're just stranded on an island, and you have to survive. You have to cut trees. You have to hunt to eat. You get thirsty. If you eat rotten food, you get stomach aches, and you can die from diseases. Animals can kill you. You can drown. Sharks can kill you. If you
Sounds like a lot is going on.
There's a lot going on in the game,
Okay.
so it's very stimulating for me,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like you have to think about all these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a night day cycle, right? um so, and then there's also a lot of resource management. It's one of the things I love about Resident Evil is item management. I love managing things in general, which is why I play things like Civilization. But
Mm-hmm.
the item management system in Resident Evil is a lot of fun. It's like, ooh, I've only got 3 shotgun shells and I got 5 handgun bullets and there's 6 zombies out there, but I know that there's a boss after that. How do I get through this situation? How do I manage my items? Do I have enough health? Can I tank it? Right? Like these are all questions you can ask yourself, and you can approach it 6 different ways, which is awesome. I love that. And
Yeah.
so in Stranded Deep, similar, you find what you can find on the island and you make use of it, and it's like, well, shit, I need more resources. But in order to get more resources, I got to venture out into the ocean. I see an island. I don't know if the island has what I need, but I need the resources. I need food. I'm out of food, right? I'm out of clean water. I don't have any coconuts on this particular item, whatever, right? And then you build a bullshit raft and you try to make it, right? And you get attacked by sharks and whatever, right?
Uh huh.
That game has no maps. Like there's a map, but it's not really a map that you can use in the game while you're playing. So so I had to pull out a piece of paper and start drawing like a personal map to figure out where
Wow.
I'm going, because if I go to this island and I see another island and I go to that island, I'm not really sure where I am in the world. So it's like, well, fuck, I'm stranded. Like I had all these materials on this first island and I need it now. I need iron or whatever.
Uh
Fuck,
huh.
how do I get there? Right? Because there's a compass, but like that's if you find a compass, right? That you have to find everything. So that game was pretty crazy. And so it not having a map was a tremendous detriment.
Well,
But
yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that makes
go ahead.
sense. Like that the map should have been there simply because, well, let's just say if there wasn't a map, right, implemented in the beginning, there should have been some exploration factor that allowed you to manage your assets as you discovered them. You know, that is a quality of life change that should have been in that game because it's an exploration game. Like, I wouldn't want any player to have to deal with that magnitude of memory, just to remember where one item is as opposed to another. Like, that's a little excessive.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I loved it. So, that's the thing, right? Like there are different kinds of gamers who appreciate different tiers of difficulty
Mm-hmm.
and different tiers of quality of life changes. I welcomed the change because being a gamer in the current landscape in the 2020s now,
Yeah.
your hand is held for everything. And you mentioned it with Horizon Zero Dawn. I have the game. I played it a little bit and I couldn't really get into it because it was just so much like the gameplay kept stopping. It's like, hey, just so you know, it's like shut the fuck up and let me play. Like I don't need just let me figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
And so I that quality of life change as far as like excessive
Hand holding.
tutorial and handholding, I don't welcome at all. And as far as like the lack of a map, I got pissed that there was no map. I'm like, are you kidding me? But then I was like, well, shit, how would I have figured this out 20 years ago if I was playing this game on PlayStation or the Sega Genesis or something like that? I would have drew a map because I did it as a kid. I would draw little, I would make notes and memos on like, okay, remember to go back here for this, this, and this, because the games back then didn't tell you everything. You had to figure things out. You had to remember because if you didn't remember, you were fucked, or you
Yeah.
had to start the game over. You know, and that's a lost art. That's you don't get that anymore. The
Mm-hmm.
second example, and I'll make this quick, is a game called Outward, and that's an adventure RPG game. And again, it's not a gorgeous looking game. It's not a game that I can say you must play it. No, it's okay. It's fine. But that game also didn't feature a map. It had a map. Well, it did have a map, but there was no player marker, so you never knew where you were on the map in real time. You had to remember, like, I'm near this landmark or I'm near this mountain. Okay, relative to where I am in the game next to this mountain, where do I want to go? Okay, is that east, west, north? Like, you have to kind of figure it out and navigate, which is really cool. It added to the exploration of the game. So quality of life changes can hinder a game, or make a game even better. But I think in general, it does take away from critical thinking, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
Yeah. That's pretty much the what I was trying to convey, as you so eloquently put there.
Don't
Um,
flatter me.
no, but I do welcome quality of life changes so long as it doesn't hinder the experience of you know.
Right.
For example, just a prime example would be fighting games. You know, just
Auto combos.
yeah, exactly, just putting in the time, learning inputs, um understanding the dragon punch input. A lot of people did not understand that, um how to do that, and being one of the people who do, it's like it was an accomplishment, and being able to pull it off when you wanted to was an even greater accomplishment. Chaining your combos, understanding what your the pros and cons of your character, and then you got to deal with quality of life. Oh, this person can just press square, 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 and do a whole 10-hit combo. It's like it takes away from the experience. It's like that's not a quality of life change. That's the game holding a person's hand to get wins.
It's the game getting watered down. I
Yeah.
think I think it's a fair distinction. I think you guys will agree. Maybe not. I don't know. But a lot
I
of people
definitely agree
confuse
with that.
quality of life with watering the game down. I think
Hmm.
those are confused because a real quality of life change would be to use Monster Hunter for an example again. And I'm sorry for the viewers who don't know or don't care about Monster Hunter, but I mean that's a game we've all collectively played and we've still played to this day.
Hmm.
If you play Monster Hunter 1, or Monster Hunter 2 on the PS2, okay, to like you need a lot of there's a lot of resource management in that game. If you needed, let's say, 20 stones, the game, like if you're on a quest and you're gathering stones for an armor or for a weapon, you can only carry 10 stones. Period. I don't care how many inventory slots you have, you can only carry 10 stones. And then you have to manually go back to your house and drop off the 10 stones, go on another quest to get another 10 stones. Instead, like now in current games, right? You have, if you have excess item, right? There's still a cap. It just gets sent to your item box at home. You don't have to quit the mission, go through 6 loading screens to do it all over again, right? Like that's quality life change. It's like very welcome. It's like, okay, you're not wasting my time here,
Yeah.
right? Dicking around, right?
It doesn't ultimately change
It
what
doesn't
the
change
game
the
is.
experience. You're still
Right.
gathering the stones, right?
Yeah.
You're still doing the activity, right? It's just not padded with this like artificial difficulty, which I think is again confused with, oh, this is just quality of life. I think people are using that term incorrectly,
Mm.
to some degree. Maybe I've used it incorrectly. I don't know, but um, I think that's just one example that I can use. But go ahead, Esoteric. I think you had something.
No, no, I absolutely agree with that. Another factor that was quality of life, and again, referring back to Monster Hunter since we all played it, uh, was the animations of the monsters, them being tired, them, walking a certain, having a certain animation when they're fatigued and weakened. Like, that's a quality of life change that allowed you to kind of prep for, will I trap the monster? Will I do this? That doesn't necessarily change the experience because the monster can abruptly just get angry and, wreck shit, but it does allow the player to be a little more immersive in a sense that, oh my god, I'm watching the animation of this monster. It's tired. I can prep better. Like, that's a quality of life change I welcome. Not, oh, the monster is weak now. You should try a trap. Like, it's like we don't need that. We don't need that. Like, we know what traps are for. We know, like, we should know when certain things in games are used. Like, let me know once and that's it. If I need to refer back to it, just have a menu where I can just go back to all the combos, all the things that I need to do in order to be a better player, and then let me go back to just experiencing this game. you know?
Wolf, do you have
So
something before I go in there?
I it's gonna sound bad.
Go for
Um
it. We're not here to make friends.
a,
We already have friends. We're all
right.
here.
A lot of people, from what it seems like, there's always this group or percentage of people who don't want that. Um they don't want to have to necessarily learn or use their resources to its full capacity. Um, Hence why we do have, quality of life changes happening in video games to begin with, because people want to go in and out of the game or they want to make the game faster or easier. A lot of people's excuses that they don't have the time because of personal reasons, but they still want to play. Um, so from what Esoteric, a lot of the gripes that Esoteric has been having, I noticed that there's a connecting pattern with them, and it's the video game literally holding the player's hand. Um, I can understand, your point of view in it, where it's like, well, at this point in the game, once I reach a certain rank or certain difficulty or certain story part of the game, I should know how to use my resources and be able to apply it to what's in front of me. Now it's more so constant reminders. It's kind of like the synapses thing that I want for all RPGs to have. But in your case of where it's like, the handler reminds you that, oh, this monster can be tried because it's not weak, it's consider it more like a constant reminder in case you didn't know that, or in case you wasn't thinking about it, or in case you didn't play the game for a while, and it's now at the point where the handler will remind you and say, okay, oh right, I forgot I can capture monsters now. It's all based on how you take the information, because even if you can use a trap, or even if the NPC does remind you, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the route you have to go. um so quality of life changes should be viewed as, upon at least the way I look at it, it should be viewed as, this is helping me understand the game better. That's where I think quality of life should be, where
Agreed.
it allows you to
Yeah.
understand the game better. But nonetheless, the challenge is still there. I love, like I said before, I love Pokemon. Um, and I love the training aspect. I love the grinding aspect. And in recent Pokemon games, you can create a perfect, I'm gonna use terminologies that not everybody's gonna understand, but you can create a perfect Pokemon with the perfect stats in a matter of minutes now, compared to, say, earlier versions where it can take you, sometimes 100 copies of the same Pokemon before you get, one or two stats, 2 or 3 stats that's perfect, quote unquote, to then have to go ahead and recycle again, which you have 15 boxes or 15 storage space. Each storage space is 30 Pokemon. If you're doing 100 at a time just to get 1 or 2 stats max, that's 3 boxes minimum that you're already eating up out of your 15. So the way Pokemon is now, you can either artificially push their stats to being perfect, or there's a new formula that's been implemented where the parents can pass on, with specific items, the parents can pass on their perfect stats, which cuts the time down exponentially, um, which allows people to push powerful Pokemon for battling faster. So instead of it being a week to create the perfect Charizard or Pikachu, you can now do it in minutes, or in an hour, hour and a half, which is a quality of life change that I can appreciate. But it does go back to what I said earlier, where the effort that I would have put in to make a powerful Pikachu, Blanka Kong can now get that same thing without really thinking about it twice. And it's like, well, damn, But in the end of the day, it's a chess game, right? All the pieces that he can play is what's available to me as well. So if I don't go the quality of life route, developing the strongest Pikachu, that's me making the game harder on myself, where I'm not going to get the fast results that he would get. And for that, I may not enjoy the game, or the game may become more difficult to play purposely. Like, why put added weights on what's already essentially something I have to do if I want to compete? So a lot of times, quality of changes should be viewed as just simply, this is what I can do. This is allowing me to enhance my gameplay experience without directly affecting my capabilities or ability as a competent player. You know, so again, I appreciate quality of life more than I dislike it,
I,
to be honest.
I completely get your point. I think it's just a gray area with, as we all stated in the beginning of this podcast, is that it's how it's implemented. Um, with Pokemon, being able to expedite the process of training your Pokemon to its effective level and stats, that's a welcome quality of life change, because it helps you get into the competitive field a lot faster. Now, what I don't consider is a welcome change that Pokemon implemented was the ability to see your opponent's Pokemon before you actually fight them. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that was a good implement. It took away the element of surprise. You know, that's just my opinion.
Okay, I disagree, but I'll let you finish.
I mean,
No,
listen.
no, finish.
Okay,
I'll tell you my point after you're done.
I'm pretty sure. I think your point is because you're able to prep beforehand. You know what the person has, so you know what to line up, what to move forward with, and so on. I get that, right? Um, but I feel like the element of surprise kind of was it was fun. I think it was personally fun because there were people who had certain builds or certain Pokemon that you weren't prepared for, but now that you see them there, you know like what they're running. Um, I'm not articulate in the way that I should right now, but to me I feel like that wasn't a great implementation. And another thing that I was gonna say about Pokemon is I will let go the expedited training, but if they were to do a quality of life change where you can auto select which move to go against which Pokemon and stuff like that, or well actually they do that technically because the move sets that you have it tells you whether it's super effective or not. Um, damn, I don't really know what to say right now, but what are you gonna say about one of my
All right,
points?
so I've got
Uh,
two things to say.
mhm,
First, I'll address Wolf on his point on the whole breeding aspect. Um, I welcome that change personally. I think it makes getting to the meat and potatoes of the game faster and easier and more accessible to more people.
Mm-hmm.
And the meat and potatoes of Pokemon, to me at least, is competitive battling, right? So I remember when we were playing Diamond and Pearl or in Platinum and just spending days, weeks sometimes prepping, just like, okay, we gotta kill 100 Machops. Okay. Like it was a slog to get your perfect Pokemon. And while it was worth it, it was a process that could have been shortened if better implemented or better, if certain design decisions were made in that particular iteration of Pokemon. Um, in later games, it became easier and easier. And if you're talking Sword and Shield, it's super brain dead. Like you don't really have there's minimal
Trace
effort.
brain dead. Yeah.
It's minimal effort to get like a max 6 IV Pokemon with the right nature and the right ability and all that. It takes little to no effort. Which I feel like is it that's straying too far on the other side of the spectrum.
mhm.
I forget which
Okay.
game had it. It might have been Sun and Moon. I don't remember, but it was a game in between Diamond and Pearl and Sword and Shield where it felt good. And it might have been X and
X and
Y.
Y I liked. That's where you had like the multi battle where you can take down like 4 or 5 Pokemon at one time, and
Yeah,
then
okay. So then it
that's
was
the one
X
I
and Y.
liked.
I
Yeah,
felt like this was a good in
that was a
between. Like
balance.
it still required work, but it wasn't just like handed to you. Here you
Yeah,
go, a
yeah.
perfect Charizard or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that. But that's just me. Like I'm known Wolf has accused me of being a masochist gamer. Can't necessarily disagree. So maybe I'm the outlier there, but whatever. So I agree. That's a quality of life change is welcomed, but sometimes quality of life changes can skew on the other side and swing too hard to the easy side of things, which I don't like. But to address Esoteric's point on like if you're battling not being able to see the opponent's lineup, I disagree. I think you could still have the element of surprise with your builds on your Pokemon moves.
Yeah,
Just
you're
because you have
right.
a Blissey or a Scizor or a Salamence or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same Salamence that everybody else has,
That's true.
you know? So you can still have the element of surprise if that matters to you or if that's valuable to your strategy, but I think it's like playing chess and not knowing what pieces are on the opposite side of the board. Like that sounds crazy to me. So to me, it's the same thing. I want to know what the hell you have so that I can like if I'm battling you and you've got a lot of fire types for some reason, and I've only got one water type, it's like okay, well, or one ground type, for example, I'm gonna save that ground type or water type for the biggest threat on your team. It's like, okay, that Blaziken's a problem. I have to have an answer for that Blaziken, so I'm gonna save my Swampert for that Blaziken, right?
It's really scenarios like that why they did it, because it becomes an uncontrollable um event where you get into the battle, and because you're unprepared for a Blaziken, which we all know as people who are into Pokemon, Blaziken is a very powerful Pokemon. You don't have an answer, or you never planned properly for that answer. It became a frustrating factor.
At
So
that point, you question, did I
yeah,
lose because of my lack of wit and skill and knowledge, or did I lose because it was a fluke? Because you just whipped out a Blaziken at the end. It's like, well, shit, okay.
whereas now
Fuck me, I'm
you
done.
Hmm.
whereas now it's still a chess game on both ends, because I can put a Blaziken. I've seen people in tournaments put powerful Pokemon on their team, or certain Pokemon on their team, to throw off the opponent's selection of Pokemon.
Mhm.
And because they'll put a Blaziken on their team but never pick the Blaziken, and now the
Right.
other guy has prepared his whole team to anti a Blaziken, but there is no Blaziken to anti.
But
So
I
the
love
guy,
that. That's
right,
awesome.
the guy went ahead and he overthunk, you know, he overthunk what his opponent would have done, and now he's gonna suffer for it, but that was his choice as a player.
Right.
So it's not looking at the glass half empty, but more like the glass being half full. You got to pull your positives out of it and say, okay, well, yeah, this sucks, but this is how it can work for me. If we were to go back and play Iceborne right now, when the monster reaches a weak point and they say, oh, it's time for the monster to be captured, that's an indication for our group to know, okay, well, yeah, we now can kill the monster, because we don't, our group don't really do the capture stuff. But now the game just basically told us, without that little skull indicator on the little tiny mini map, the game now just verbally. So not only can you visually see it, but now you can verbally hear it, that the monster is in a position where it is on its way of being defeated. Again, let's look at it, like, that's a positive. That's a way you can pull it out and say, okay, well, this is how this benefits me, um, as a gamer, or as the person who's playing the game. Where unless like,
I could see that, but I think that's an example of it being there but not overbearing. Whereas
Yeah.
Esoteric's example of Horizon Zero Dawn, every fucking 30 seconds, it's you lose control of your character. Now there's a cutscene to explain something or whatever. It's like, oh god, like that's where it's like that's the pendulum swing where it swings too much to like easy mode or like just brain dead mode where it's like, okay, well now I don't have to. You robbed me of the ability of figuring that out because now you just rubbed it in my face, right?
Yeah.
It's like
yeah,
playing chess and then like
mm,
somebody backseat playing for you, like, oh, you should move the rook. And it's like, well, okay, you robbed me of the opportunity of figuring that out or
mm.
learning the consequence of not moving the rook in this particular move because now that's the obvious move.
Yeah, okay, I
You know what I
understand
mean?
that.
So
Yeah,
like there's shades of gray in there. And I think some games, the quality of life, again, it goes back to it being confused with a game being watered down and it being more of a cinematic hand holding experience than a video game where you're in control.
I definitely agree, and I definitely feel like video games should have a level of critical thinking behind it.
Yeah.
While I do accept quality of life as a positive thing to gaming, I also feel like, all right, look at it like this. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but there are people who do criticize people who play video games. There are video games isn't always in the positive light when it comes to politics. Um, video games can also be blamed for a lot of people's bad decisions in the reality of the world.
Mhm.
So if I can say, well, here's one positive argument about why a person should play video games, it should be the fact that the game tests their or challenges their ability to rationalize their situation. Um,
Problem solve.
hence, right. Hence, where the critical thinking comes into play. I raise my boys on critical thinking. I always tell them, when you make a decision and if you have to make a decision and you're unsure, sit down and think about it. Use your head. You know, my little one is adorable. He'll run to me and he'll say, "Daddy, Daddy, I used my head and this is what I came up with," when he feels like, he accomplished something by simply using his head. Um, I I feel like when I can say, okay, well, this video game allows that for me, it's where I can appreciate the game a little more. Um, let's take The Legend of Zelda, for example,
I
where,
was literally gonna.
right, the early Legend of Zelda games, they test your critical thinking to an extent because you have to solve the puzzles. And not all the time are the puzzles just that blatant for you. Sometimes you really got to think it, like, you really have to think it through. Whereas Breath of the Wild, it has its puzzles, but to me, they aren't as potent as, say, Twilight Princess or Majora's Mask, especially Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask has some crazy puzzles to it, regardless of me not really being a big fan of that particular title. But it had some crazy puzzles to it because you were timed in a lot of the stuff that Majora's Mask did. Not only were you timed, but you also had to solve this puzzle. So you were under, it's a lot of pressure in being able, or building your brain to being able to think through a problem. And it helped me as an individual because when I'm taking a test, I look at it as a video game. Like, okay, well, my school period is what, 30, 40 minutes. The teacher is only giving us a test for roughly 20 minutes. This is a puzzle to me. Now I feel like I'm playing a Zelda game, you know, and for that, it allows me to critically think out my situation and how am I going to approach this test? How am I going to approach the answers? How am I going to do this test in the time limit that I have? So I'm able to take that and correlate it with school. Um, I feel like video games now, because of quality of life, you don't really have to do that anymore. But as much as I do love that quality of life, is the certain quality of life things are in video games. I can also, again, hold it accountable in why people do feel entitled, why gamers feel like they should not have to waste their times on video games. And it becomes a hard argument to justify to a person on why I still play video games because they're not as thought inducing as they used to be in some cases, of course. In some cases.
Well,
But
well,
that's just
to your last point, Dev, one of the things that I would say is you can say that it's stress relieving when it comes to like video games. That was one of the major components of games being like basically coming out and people enjoying them so much because they were like they relieved a lot of stress. Um, to kind of go back to your point about the differences between other Zelda games and Breath of the Wild, I would kind of say that Breath of the Wild had more thought inducing puzzles simply because there were several different ways to tackle them. The other puzzles within the Zelda franchise were more linear. So although you did have to figure them out, there was more of a linear approach as opposed to Breath of the Wild, where it was like one person solved it this way, but another person kind of finagled the game in a way by utilizing the tools they had to kind of achieve the same results. So I would give like Breath of the Wild a little more credit pertaining to like its puzzles. That's just my opinion.
I didn't have trouble with it.
No, I'm not saying that it's
No,
trouble, but what I'm saying is
He's
that
just saying that there was more than one solution to the same problem, whereas in older Zelda games, there is just the one
just the
solution.
yeah,
one
which
solution. Okay,
promotes cognitive
that's
thinking.
right.
In
That's
my
fine. I didn't think about it in that way. When I played Breath of the Wild, I really didn't. But yeah, you're right, because I've seen people do some crazy stuff in videos now with like the freezing and anti-gravity system in Breath of the Wild. So okay, I give it that. But um my approach with Breath of the Wild, I didn't feel like my brain was being I didn't feel like I was being challenged. Or maybe because I'm older. You know, maybe because I played so many
yeah.
puzzle-like games that obviously it's mental training and I'm being thrown into something that my brain is used to now at this point. Um but I think I just my personal experience with the game was just more so it was more heavily focused on the story and not so much of what the traditional Zelda games were. Not even the boss fights to me was really challenging. Zelda boss fights are never challenging, but there's always like a little puzzle game that you play with them or you try to figure out with them. Not even these bosses was that pretty much. Um, but that's just my, that's was my experience. But okay, I'll give it to the fact that I grew up on certain types of video games in terms of like testing critical thinking or testing how you're going to get out of the situation. So because I came up with one way out of the many ways to solve a puzzle in Breath of the Wild, it seemed too easy to me. I'll change I'll reiterate my point of view on it and say that's what it was instead.
Well, no, I completely understand that. I just pointed out Breath of the Wild simply because like I wasn't really speaking from the premise of the difficulty within the different puzzles. I was speaking more so of like the promoting of different ways to solve a puzzle, um, which would, in my opinion, kind of like allow like different thought process, more cognitive thinking. Um, a lot of people who do things differently, they're trying to find ways to do um, to make it more efficient. Kind of like I don't know if you guys ever watch those do-it-yourself videos or things like that, where they find easier ways to utilize something, or um, they'll take an existing object that's no longer used by the masses and kind of turn it into something that is more sufficient. Those type of videos, yeah, I feel like things like that kind of enhances like thought process, which is why I was kind of like alluding to Zelda Breath of the Wild and their puzzles.
It's just allowing people to be more creative with their thought process. I think we're talking about something different here, where
Mm-hmm.
it's creativeness, creative thinking versus
Creativity,
critical thinking.
right?
Which is fine. The creative thinking is great. That's how innovation happens. But you know, I think you guys both have a solid point. It's just I think you're arguing two different points. If
That
that makes sense.
critical thinking for me in video games is literally how you know, these are your resources, how you're going to use them.
Right.
That's what critical thinking for me is in video games. So again, the whole aspect, if the quality of life is, well, you don't really need to use these resources because you have XYZ options, then you're you're kind of dulling or you're watering down my ability to, or the needed ability to think, how am I going to deal with this challenge? How are you going to present this challenge to me? So it's it's where I start to um not like, I won't say not like, but it's where I start to realize the negativity that quality of life can bring to an individual who's playing a video game. Because no matter what you do as a hobby, it should be thought inducing in some way. Um, and I think one of the biggest things about video games is the fact that it really challenged your mindset. It really did. Like Donkey Kong Country, not Donkey Kong Country, I'm sorry, Donkey Kong, or whatever the first Donkey Kong game was where Mario had to jump over the barrels and get to him, that was still thought inducing in itself because the game will trick you and you would need to know when it's going to do that, how it's going to do that, and how you're going to get through that. Early Mega Man games, you have the enemy that's floating in space shooting pellets at you. You have to jump onto that platform. You're in a situation where you're in a tight spot because you can jump and get shot, flinch and fall off, or you can just completely miss your shot. How are you going to solve this? What are you thinking on how to get by this? That's critical thinking for me in video games. But now, it can be, well, either the enemy is not there because it didn't help the player in any way, or the platform moves back and forth, or Mega Man gets, some type of special enhancement that allows him to just negate the situation altogether. You kind of took away the ability for me to think on how I'm going to pass this point in the game. That's where I come from on that.
I think that's a great point. I don't know if you have any last thoughts, Esoteric, but I have this one last thought because Wolf reminded me. So there's this video, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, called Sequelitis, and it's produced by the YouTuber Ego Raptor, and he talks about Mega Man X, and he shows how the game teaches you what to do. So it's like, okay, you're presented with a challenge. It's just a pit, right? If you fall in, you die. Okay, well, clearly I'm not supposed to walk. I'm supposed to jump. So the game teaches you how to jump. Okay, great. Now you're on a plane, right? No challenges, and there's an enemy who comes down, crashes down, and I think it shoots pellets at you. And the game only gives you one to fight. It's like, okay, the game taught you what this enemy is, what it does, and you have to figure out how to beat it, right? And once you figure it out, okay, well, great. Now you get to the next segment. Now there's a pit, and there's two of those enemies that you just fought, right? So now it's like, okay, well, we taught you how to jump, and we taught you how to fight this enemy. Now I want you to combine both of those skills and execute this challenge, right? That's what I want games to do. Is instead of just having a text box or fucking voice actor, hey, you should go and use this. Shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Like teach me intuitively, right? That's important. And I think a lot of games don't do that, and they take the easy way out, and they just go random text box. Or the thing I hate the most, which is the loading screen or a screen of a controller with all the fucking controls. And I'm like, how the fuck do you expect me to remember all of that in 10 seconds? Like, that's the worst. That's the laziest way to teach a player. I hate those. So that's all I wanted to say. Any closing thoughts, Esoteric?
I would say in regards to that particular point is I think they were able to effectively do that simply because of the limitations on the game Mega Man for like the system that it came on. Like if you're referring to like old school Mega Man like Nintendo, you only
Mega
had
Man
like
X, Super Nintendo. Yeah.
you only had like what, four buttons, you know? So
I don't think that matters because there have been plenty of games that came out in the same era that didn't explain shit and were poorly designed.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
can say
it's an art form. Go ahead.
like I could say like Esoteric, you're streaming that game now, but Ghost of Tsushima did a good job in teaching you how to combine your abilities as you play through the game and you go
I
into
agree.
harder or different areas. It teaches you like, okay, well, this is how this is your stance, your water stance, and it's going to fight this type of enemy. So fight this type of enemy. But then it starts to challenge you. Okay, well, now you have two types of that enemies to fight, but now you have a different type of enemy. So how are you going to deal with that different type of enemy while you're using the water stance? Well, you can't. You have to now use a different stance. So you have to now implement more resources. You have to learn the game. That's critical thinking. You have to learn the game. And I can bet you, because you're a competent player, Esoteric, I can bet you that you find yourself when you're fighting hordes of enemies, which is Ghost of Tsushima is a good number. It's usually like maybe 6 or 7 at a time. um, you find yourself switching between your water, your wind, your stone, or whatever the elements of the stances are. You find yourself switching constantly because you know that this stance is going to fight the spearman. You know, this stance is going to fight the swordsman. This stance is going to fight the big dudes. And you don't want to lose unnecessarily. So, based on the one that's, approaching you at that moment, is the stance you're switching to. But the game does teach you, and it puts you in a situation where you need to implement it, so that when you get to the end, you know how to play this game, or when you get to a good point, you know how to play this game. Your loss is your loss. It's not an excuse. It's not because of the game, but it's because of you as the player.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was saying I feel like as a new game or a more current game, it did it very well as to what, going back to the days of Mega Man X. Ghost of Tsushima did it very well.
I agree. They definitely did do it very well, and also like the quality of life changes, or I'm sorry, not changes. The implements that they added to Ghost of Tsushima are optional. For example, being able to navigate, you have the option to choose whether or not you want to utilize the whole wind element. Um, that's at your discretion. It's not the wind constantly blowing as you're running around. So that's a nice way to use quality of life changes, and I hope that they do implement that in other games. But if Ghost of Tsushima was constantly, oh, press this button to beat this enemy or press that button to subdue another enemy, like it will definitely break, in my opinion, which I've said earlier, the immersion of the game. And
Well, the wind mechanic that you're referring to, I wouldn't say that's a quality of life change. I would say that's just a better design choice as opposed to having what most games have, where it's just like the line or the dots pointing to where you need to go or
Or the
whatever,
big
the
ass red
waypoint
arrow.
or it's something like that. Like having the wind, it's a part of the world. It's not intrusive to like the UI. And you command it, like you ask like, okay, where do I have to go? And I think it's like you press an R3 or whatever, and the game kind of like gives you a little like wind gust or whatever. It's like, oh, okay. And like you use it and it's not abrupt. It's not like, hey, go this way, stupid. It's you know what I mean? That's where it's like a little much.
well,
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
no,
just
no,
wanted
no,
to like make that distinction.
no. I do acknowledge the distinction, but what I'm saying is, in comparison to games that didn't really have maps, compared to Ghost of Tsushima, which does in fact have a map, or in this particular case, navigation. Because back in the days, we didn't have much games that had navigation. The first Legend of Zelda, you had a map, but you had to like pretty much move in squares as to where you wanted to go. It didn't depict where you should go. I was saying that correlation between the quality of life changes of this game now allowing you to have a way to navigate and see where you're going is optional, you know. Um, and it's also subtle. It's not like
Yes,
other
that's the word
games.
I wanted to use. Subtle. Very
Yeah,
good.
it's so I do acknowledge that. Um, but yeah, that was pretty much my take on it. It's it's how you use it, you know. Quality of life is based off of how the developers use it. It's not, you know, I can't say it's good or bad. It's how it's being used.
All right, fair point. So, we are out of time. Thank you guys for joining me for this conversation. This was a good one. Um, Another one in the chamber. Let us know in the comments below what quality of life changes you enjoyed or disliked in certain games. Should games be easier? Should games be harder? Like, what's your take on it? Like the video
Or
if you
what
enjoyed it. Go ahead.
or what quality of life you would like to see in your favorite genre of video
Yeah.
games.
Do you want to never have to reload a gun in any shooter? I don't know. I think that's a little much, but it's a quality of life change that could happen. Um, yeah, subscribe if you want more content. We're going to be producing podcasts once a week. So stay tuned for that. Esoteric, where can they find us?
All right, guys and gals, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Logical Gamers TV. Just look for the light bulb logo. Also, I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time. So definitely feel free to come through and come chill.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
All right, take care.
Laters.